I'm so tempted to try to rip off the other labels, but I'm also, you know what, screw it. Let's do it. Hey y'all, it's Alex and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be continuing on Paint Marker Month, Paint Marker Marathon. I think I'm gonna start going towards Marathon because that's not assuming that I'm going to make 30 plus videos going over different brands of paint markers. I could if I had money. The name of this series aside, today we're going to be continuing with the third in our paint marker series, Montana markers. This is the only other paint marker I've managed to see out in a physical store. At my local Blick Arts, they've got Posca pens, they've got Molotow markers, and they've got Montanas. And I'm pretty sure Montana is mostly a spray paint brand. Here is their website. Around Christmas, my girlfriend and I were looking for presents for each other, and I suggested, why don't we just go to Blick Arts, buy each other like $50 worth of random supplies, and then we'll just have a random art bag challenge. I really liked the last random art bag I had from Blick, but I figured it could be fun to curate them for each other. I am gonna do a video on that. I just need to finish this series first. But I digress. I said I've really been feeling paint markers, and she looked at my big organizational thing of paint markers and said, I don't know if I could get you specific ones without getting duplicates, and I said, get me Montanas, because I don't have any of those yet, and I know they're in stores, so just get me any of the Montanas. I actually completely held off on using them in any art pieces, just so I could keep my review fresh for this one. Why don't we go ahead and get into Molotow paint markers. Montana. I've noticed one problem I already have with these is I keep calling them Molotows because Molotow, Montana, they're very, very close in my brain, and in my swatch page, I've marked some Montanas as Molotows, and kind of vice versa, even though their packaging looks completely different. And speaking of packaging, every marker in this series is going to be tested on 3 different criteria. First is the packaging, second is the swatching, and the third is the drawing. I felt each of those were kind of necessary for how I review markers, because the swatching might not be indicative of how it actually lays down on paper. Yeah, the Molotows yesterday really taught me. If this is your first video in my paint marker marathon, I will link the playlist at the top corner and at the very end of the video. And without further ado, let's get into the packaging. So, the packaging of Montana markers feels like a hit and a miss. If you're looking at this marker, let's start with the smaller one. Where's the brand information? Like, what brand of markers is this? It took me about like 5 times to figure out that it's this little thing right here. And even on, it disappears on these lighter colors. That gray is not contrasting enough. The red is a little better, but still, it's just a little disappointing that their brand name is so small. And then the color name is, once again, only on this little sticker that I think I should be able to completely rip off. It destroys the look of the marker. It could be a fine looking marker. The only other things on the packaging, they have that they're high coverage, if you can even read that, matte colors, and refillable. Now, for the cap, I do like that they are somewhat unique. This is the only one in the series that I think does the clear cap any justice, at least in the fine point markers they are. So this is the 15mm chisel nib, and this cap is supposed to be entirely clear, but it's not, because all of this is leakage from the pen. It's incredibly messy. I have to be very careful every time I open this marker or it'll spit paint. It looks like it's dried out a little bit, but it's been very juicy recently. It does have fully clear packaging. This is not colored plastic. You can see that this is the actual ink. It's easier to see on this one. Oh, there's a little shaker going by. These do have a plus from me for being able to see the ink But overall, I'm kind of disappointed by the cap for the larger ones as it's just covered in ink from the pen leaking. And then this really irks me. I really want to get rid of these stickers. Okay, I'm gonna sacrifice this one and make sure it's not like covering it up. Oh! That's not right. Oh my god! Ah! Wait. Gigi, do you see this? I'm a little scared to try to go into... Oh, honey, no, not the camera, please. I'm so tempted to try to rip off the other labels, but I'm also... You know what? Screw it. Let's do it. I wonder if I can... Yeah, okay. So there would be a spot on the marker to fit within their packaging that would include the color name, either due to manufacturing problems or stocking problems. They all just have the exact same shrink-wrapped packaging, and in order to cover up the fact that they're all for one color of marker, they just put a sticker over it. I'm a little disappointed, not gonna lie, but there's probably good reason for it. That doesn't mean that it's not a point off from me. The small brand name size and kind of hard to read packaging and the color number would be a 3 flat out, but I do really like the cap and the fact that all of this is just visible ink, so I'll be nice and give them a 3.5. For the swatching, we will be using the Sharp Yellow Light in the 15mm nib and the Royal Red. I think this is the 4. It just says fine. So how is this a fine point? Let's see how small of a dot I can get. It's more of a dash than a dot. You get surprisingly small dots for this large of a nib because it is a really hard nib. Big chunky line there. As far as trying to get a point from the lines, I feel like these are able to accomplish it a little better than Posca's. Onto the layers. The opacity of the red has me a little worried. So here's layer 2. Let me just... That's not great. It has kind of like the sheen to it, and it goes from being this red that I quite liked to kind of like wet versus dried blood, I'd almost say, where it starts going a little bit brown in the second layer. That's weird. I have a feeling this one is not going to have any problems with the gesso, which is just to simulate a more rough canvas texture. There's the gesso. There's the normal paper. I've got a little paper fuzzle on the edge. It's not doing too terribly on the gesso. Let's see how it varnishes. And let's do the dark over light test as well. So easy. For this section, I am using the high gloss varnish from Liquitex. Usually I prefer to use matte varnishes, but I don't currently have a matte varnish. So the way I usually varnish is by going in a few directions a few times to make sure I don't have any pooling. And I'm definitely picking up some, you can see it on my paintbrush, and it's starting to bleed out from the edge of the red a little. This is enough for me to declare this one a failure. If I'm varnishing a piece, I want it to be just as it was before. I don't want any tinging. How much It doesn't take much more to really get a whole lot on this paintbrush, so definitely fails the varnish test. Onto the light over dark tests. This is purely for the opacity. Yeah, that's not fantastic. It's really pulling up the color underneath, and just the one dot doesn't give me a lot of confidence for its opacity. Let's see about the darker color. Actually, let's see whether or not this changes the tone as it dries. No, it's still drying really kind of like an ugly reddish brown instead of the red that I'd expect from this. So let's put down a scribble of pencil and a scribble of color erase at about the level that I usually draw at. Let's see whether or not we can see. I need to clean off this nib. Here's the light. Oh yeah. I can still see the color erase through both of these lighter colors. And I can kind of see it through on the pencil in person, but I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that on camera. Now for the colored pencil test. This is just to make sure that the colored pencil doesn't grab at the color weird. I'm still able to get a pretty good gradient going up, and I can actually darken this one pretty well too. Now for the red, let's go in with like a dark brown. This one does grab weirdly. There's like this little circle here. You can see how there's like a vertical line here and a vertical line there. So these definitely fail on the water resistance and the opacity, and I have no idea what is going on with the red. That's actually really disappointing for me. Posca's received a 3, losing 1 point on the varnish test and 1 point on the opacity test. But I think these are going to lose another point for this red because I was really excited to have a nice deep red color, but that's just not what this is going to be. So these are going to get a 2 in the swatching. Let's get into the drawing section of this video. Every one of these brands was matched up with one random illustration, and all of these were also randomly generated. For this one, originally it was supposed to be a shark girl, but considering the size of the markers, I actually think that I'd have a little bit too much trouble, so I drew a different one. This one is a dragon lady who has half up, half down hair, wearing some sort of Renaissance outfit, and is holding a crystal ball. Pretty instantly, this marker got paint on my hands, so this is why I wanted to go in with my biggest marker first. It's the juiciest. I wanted to be able to control the edges of my shapes with the smaller pens later on. I really should have erased a lot of this stuff better, especially wherever I was going in with the yellows, because the sharp yellow has absolutely no opacity. The sharp yellow light is a little better about covering over the pencil lines. I still should have taken it down a little bit. Now, I was really excited to use this red, but like I found in the swatching, it just ended up not being that great. The blotchiness of the color was even more amplified once I put it over a wider area, and I started noticing a really weird blotching pattern. Even covering over a second layer on the red didn't really help the blotching I had. The blue is honestly the one I had the least problems with in this entire group, which is why I chose to use it for the skin. The hardest part about this piece was trying to do very small accents with this big chunky nib, but it ended up actually working okay. The line art for all of the pieces in this series are going to be done with Posca's just because they're the only ones I have, and I feel like a lot of these aren't going to work with a lineless style. Originally, I was thinking maybe I'll do a black line art for everything, but then it ended up looking really flat, whereas I've been doing a lot of color line arts on others, Then I kept switching back and forth in my head about which color would look best where. The purple didn't really end up showing up very well against the red, so later on that had to be changed to blue. So basically all of the lines had to double in thickness to cover over where there were little blotches of the other color showing through. These markers were really odd to work with. They blotched weirdly for the red. The light yellow and the blue were perfectly fine. I've actually used both of these markers in other pieces since doing this. I don't think I will ever touch the red again just because it was weirdly blotchy and shiny. Also, apologies for the lighting of this section. Gigi kept moving into my frame, so I kept having to move where I was filming, which is why it's so variable. Some areas in the red started cracking in the same way that the Molotows did. These two markers are honestly a little bit more alike than just in name. They behaved really similarly, except for this one had a little bit of a sheen to it. And also a really raised edge where I picked up the tape. But here you can see that little splotch crack crater I was talking about, and also the sheen. As much as I do really enjoy the outcome piece that we got from this one and the concept of it, these markers really disappointed me. I'm really shocked at how weirdly textured the red became, both at the mid stage and the end stage, now that there's like weird little crackles. And then the opacity of the sharp yellow just didn't wow me. I do really like the art piece that came out of it. However, these markers, as far as the drawing process goes, I'm gonna give them a 1. Because while the Molotows, who got a 2, had a lot of crackling issues and the color isn't exactly what I wanted, at least they don't have as much of a weird sheen issue. Out of 15, these are currently the lowest at a 6.5. So here's our lineup so far, from the top-rated Posca pens down to the current bottom of the barrel, the Montana markers. Be sure to come back tomorrow for the next one to see how we end up changing our ranking. Regardless of where this piece falls in the lineup, thank you guys for joining me in this video. If this is the first of my paint marker marathon you're catching, the playlist is going to be at the very end. I hope you guys have enjoyed the process of this little fiction, and if you have any experience with these markers, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. If you are going to join me in the next one, I'll see you there.